Well, hello there, my friends. It's Dave Hilton here from Resolution Stream here to talk to you about the 7 signs that your company has a bad case of unresolved conflict. Now, as we talked about last week, that April is actually Conflict Awareness Month, and most people aren't aware that that even exists, Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. So those of us in the ADR industry, the alternative dispute resolution and conflict management industry, are doing our best this month to make sure that people are aware of workplace conflict and the causes and the signs and all that stuff. Now, last week, we covered some of the words that we typically use not only at work, but also elsewhere to hide or downplay conflict that's happening. And this week, I wanted to talk about the 7 signs that you've got a bad case of unresolved conflict in your business, in your organization. And it doesn't matter what kind of organization you've got. It could be a gigantic organization. It could be a very small organization where it's just a few of you. But the chances of you having some type of conflict in your organization is quite high. It's very, very common, but it's not something to be afraid of. Conflict within itself is not necessarily a bad thing. And conflict is not always what you immediately consider what we've been taught, especially here in the United States, that conflict means violence or war. No, conflict takes several different levels. And one of the future videos I do will talk about the multi-levels of conflict. But we've got these 7 signs that you've got conflict, and we want to talk about all these because workplace conflict, I mean, it can really get out of control. And the problem is, a lot of people avoid conflict. And so they just think that by avoiding it, by ignoring it, that they hope, especially managers, entrepreneurs, they hope it just disappear. And that's never going to happen. So let's talk about the signs. All right. So we're going to go over each one of these. The first sign that you have a bad case of unresolved conflict in your organization is poor work performance, low productivity, creativity, and initiative. And this is a very, very common thing, and you'll see it. And you just have to know what to look for. And it's typically the people who are highly productive. Well, all of a sudden, you'll start seeing them slip a little bit. And it won't be like a gigantic. It won't be one of those things that you can immediately tell. It'll be progressive. It'll be over time. You'll have poor work performance, and it could be multiple people. It could just be a couple of people in your team or in your organization that kind of show you the sign that it exists, that you've got poor work performance, which could be a sign of some unresolved conflict that's going on. Because the conflict hasn't been resolved, they are starting not to care so much. So you've got poor work performance, you've got low productivity, and depending on the type of work that you do, it's possible that the creativity can go down, especially if you work in a creative industry. Workers' initiative can go down. They just don't feel like doing it. There's a bunch of unresolved conflict, and they just don't care as much as they used to. So if you notice this in your organization, that's a pretty good sign that you probably have a problem that you need to address, and you need to do a little bit more investigation to figure out what's going on. Now, sign number 2 that you have a bad case of unresolved conflict in your organization: increased absenteeism and disengagement. Again, a lot of these go hand in hand, and it's a progressive thing. And it's not necessarily that you're going to see low productivity first. You could see this first, people not showing up. Now, I know in this current state of affairs around the world where a lot of people are doing remote work, the big question that I've had sent to me is, well, how do you know, how is this a sign when you have a lot of people doing remote work? Because you don't necessarily see what they do all day. You might see them on a Zoom meeting. You might see them on occasion in the office, depending on what type of business you run. But if you start seeing disengagement, like true disengagement, where they show up late to the Zoom meetings, or they don't show up at all, and they're always coming up with excuses about why they missed the meeting or whatever, their dog was sick, or they had to take their kid to the doctor or whatever. This could be a sign that there's some unresolved conflict just hiding under the surface there at your business or organization. But increased absenteeism and disengagement is sign number 2 that you might have some unresolved conflict that you need to take care of. Now, sign number 3, and this again goes, all of them are sort of combined, right? High turnover and decreasing morale. Now, unfortunately, this could be caused by numerous things. It could be that the pay isn't as well as what they could get at your competitors. So this isn't necessarily 100%, and none of these are 100% guaranteed sign that it's unresolved conflict. But that's why you need to do more investigation and ask more questions of the people that you work with and the people that work around you. Because if you have high turnover, what's going to happen is the more people that leave, the morale is just automatically going to go down. I mean, they go hand in hand, right? The decreasing morale is caused by high turnover, and the decreasing morale might cause higher turnover. So you just have to keep that in mind. But if you've got a lot of people who seem disgruntled, if you have a lot of people who just seem very unhappy with their work, this is a pretty good sign you might have some unresolved conflict, and you just need to sit people down and just have a candid conversation with them, and don't expect them to be completely upfront and honest with you, because there may be a trust issue. I mean, part of the unresolved conflict that's hiding there under the surface in your business or organization could be the fact that they just don't trust you as a supervisor, as a manager, as the business owner. They don't trust that their problems, that their issues will be addressed, will be acknowledged or understood. So they may not even try. So it may take a few times of actually sitting people down and getting them to be honest with you about what's happening. I mean, why are people quitting? Why is morale going down? But again, if people leave, morale goes down, and when morale continues to go down, turnover is going to go up. So it can be a very bad cycle, and it can escalate pretty quickly in most businesses and organizations. Now, sign number 4 of the 7 signs that your organization or business has a bad case of unresolved conflict. Number 4, high stress and bad attitudes. Now, you kind of have to take into consideration that, of course, in most businesses and organizations, you're going to have those 1 or 2 or 3 people who always kind of have a bad attitude, and they're not the most social people and the most friendly people. So you can't really look at them to gauge what kind of unresolved conflict. You need to find the people who normally have a pretty good attitude, the people who are normally happy at work, and now all of a sudden, or over a period of time, things have changed. And you have to figure out, you have to do some digging. Are these changes being caused by unresolved conflict in your company, or is it something external in their personal life? So you're going to have to separate those two. And again, frank conversations with people can usually help you do this. But high stress levels in a company, and it's amazing when you think about stress, people have different tolerances of stress, kind of like, different tolerances of alcohol. Some people can drink a lot and it doesn't affect them quite as much. The same thing is stress. Some people, when they get a little bit stressed, they completely fall apart. And then you have some people who really can shine during stress, and they become better and more productive during stressful times. So you have to know your people, especially if you're a manager or a supervisor or a business owner. You really have to know what the normal behavior of all of your employees are to be able to gauge, all right, so these people who normally don't show signs of stress, all of a sudden are having stress. Is this caused by something external, or is it internal? Is it because unresolved conflict is going on? So that could be a sign that you have unresolved conflict if you have stressed out people who normally don't show any signs of being stressed out. Sign number 5, and this right here is like a nightmare, absolute nightmare for most business managers, for HR people, because what you see, sign number 5, increased workers' comp claims, EEO complaints, and lawsuits. Now, a lot of times, because of unresolved conflict, when somebody feels that they're not being acknowledged, when they feel that their issue isn't being validated by their company, by their boss or their supervisor or whatever, a lot of times they'll escalate that, and they'll be like, okay, well, if you're not going to listen to me, well, guess what? Maybe you'll listen to this workers' comp claim, or maybe you'll listen to the EEOC because that could cost you a lot of money. Maybe now you'll listen to what I have to say. Maybe now you'll take me serious. And the same thing with lawsuits. Hello, I'm suing you. That could be a big sign. I mean, that's an obvious sign a lot of times of unresolved conflict, because they don't feel that they're getting a fair share, their fair shake. They don't feel they're getting justice for whatever the issue is. So they resort to escalating the conflict up to the point of workers' compensation claims, EEO complaints, and or lawsuits. So that is a huge sign that you've got a problem with some unresolved conflict. And at that point, there's not a whole lot you can do other than try to protect yourself, unfortunately. Let's see. Number 5 here, that was increased workers' comp, EEO complaints and lawsuits. Number 6, the sign of the 7 signs that your company has a bad case of unresolved conflict: emotional triangles and clustering. Now, usually it takes me a little time to kind of explain how this works. So, an emotional triangle, think about it this way. Let's say we're in a situation at work and you have somebody, let's say we have Bob, right? We have Bob, and Bob is now having some sort of conflict with Sally. So Bob and Sally have this unresolved conflict. So what do? Well, Bob, he goes to all his work buddies and he's like, Sally just doesn't listen to me. She doesn't understand me. I just don't like her very much. You don't like her either, right? An emotional triangle is you're trying to get support, especially, and this is especially true if, let's say, Bob is Sally's direct report, right? What Bob is trying to do is get that emotional triangle going so that he feels more powerful, because the more people he has behind him, the more support he has and the stronger he feels. So you've got these emotional triangles so that you can team up, you can tag team on somebody that you don't necessarily like. So Bob may go to his buddies, or vice versa if they're at the same level in a corporate, in a company or organization. What may happen is Bob goes to his buddies and Sally goes to her friends within the company, and they all try it. So these are all emotional triangles. They're trying to get more people involved. They're trying to find more support within the company. But it's especially true whenever you're talking about supervisors, when you're talking about managers, when you're talking about executives. Whenever you, as an employee of that person, don't feel like you're being respected, you don't feel like you're being heard, a lot of times you'll want to get more emotional support. You want to get just more help from people who agree with you. Take my side. Take my side on this. You don't like Sally. You like me. So that means you need to be on my side. Now, that happens not only in the workplace, but that also happens at home, right? The emotional triangles. And clustering is basically the same thing, just in that bigger scope where it's not just 2 or 3 people. It could be, one team where you have one full department against another. So you may have the IT department against sales, or you may have, transportation up against, some other department within a company, or production against management, whatever it is, these clustering of these departments getting together and trying to support each other in this unresolved conflict. So if you start seeing these emotional triangles showing up, little groups, whispering about one another and looking over at other groups or other people, that's a pretty good sign that you probably have some kind of unresolved conflict happening within your company or your organization. And finally, number 7 here of the 7 signs that your business probably has a bad case of unresolved conflict, and that is depression, aggression, and violence. Now, again, this is an extreme at the end of this. It's probably the next step after maybe the suing, after the workers' comp claims, after all that stuff, where you find that people are becoming, angry, they're becoming aggressive, they're becoming violent. And the last thing we want to do is, in bullying and things like that. So, it's not just physical violence, but it could be emotional or psychological violence as well. And that type of aggression, or there are some people who have that that direct personality where they're going to go external with their anger, and then you have a lot of other folks who they internalize all of that, they keep that inside, and so that turns into a deep depression. So you see these behavioral changes and things in your employees, in your teams. You really might want to have some candid conversations with some folks about what's going on. And again, it's not something that happens overnight. It's not like you're in one day, everybody's happy. You come in the next day and everybody's depressed or angry or whatever. It happens gradually. And the problem is because it happens gradually, we don't really see the signs. We don't recognize the signs. So the earlier you can see one of these 7 signs or multiple of these signs, that should be a trigger. That should be like a red alert. That should be your spidey sense going off saying, we've got a serious, serious problem. We may have some workplace conflict and we need to deal with this, right? Absolutely. So there you go. The 7 signs that your company has a bad case of unresolved conflict. And we're talking about this month because April is, as I mentioned already, April is Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. Now, the next live stream I'm going to do, now that I've talked about The signs this time around, the signs to look for. I talked about the words that we tend to use when we're trying to hide or downplay conflict in the workplace. This next time, I'm going to talk specifically the top 5 causes of workplace conflict. So now you have an understanding the 7 signs that you have some unresolved conflict. So once you know the signs and you find some, well, you have to dig down deep and you have to find the cause of this. So the top 5 causes of workplace conflict, that will be the subject of our next video that we do, which I believe will be next week as well. So Workplace Conflict Awareness Month, that's what's going on here. The top 5 causes of workplace conflict the next time. I highly recommend that if you have an opportunity, please check out our website, resolutionstream.com. We offer all kinds of training and information and things like that. Several videos of my past streams you can watch on there to learn more about workplace conflict and team conflict resolution and all that good stuff. But check out that website there, resolutionstream.com, and we'll see you next time as we talk about those top 5 causes of workplace conflict during April, which again is Workplace Conflict Awareness Month. We appreciate you watching. See you next time.